There is a renewed push for reforms to our state's mental health systems after the murders of a Peoria couple at the hands of their mentally ill adult son.
They may not have realized that they were in harm's way, and our system just let them down.
Now today, we are speaking with an advocate who knew the family's journey and details the many attempts made to get their son the help that he needed.
Our Sean Rice is here in studio, and we just put up a picture of the parents there, Sean, and they live in this nice neighborhood. It just shows this could happen to anybody, really.
It knows no county boundaries. Mental illness can impact any family, and it did with this family. We do know that Scott and Lisa Turk filed several mental health petitions on their 29-year-old son, Jonathan. What we do not know is what happened with those petitions. Was Jonathan committed to a hospital, and was he court-ordered to take medication? It's not clear because medical records are not public record. But there was a larger problem spotlighted by this couple's murders. A mental health system here in Arizona that leads to people either landing in jail or prison or back home with their families, often putting those folks in danger. Now, the Turks were allegedly stabbed by their son on Tuesday night inside their Peoria home near 83rd Avenue in Joe Max. He called 911 admitting to the crimes. The explanation he offered for why he did it, that his parents were forcing him to take medication he did not want to take. Now, Rachel Strife, co-founder of Arizona Mad Moms, it's a group who helps families with children who have serious mental health illnesses. She tells me there are parents all over the valley suffering through the same dilemma. They know their children are dangerous, but there are no beds available to house them, medicate them, and ensure they are not in a position to harm others. She says even when people are committed to a hospital for treatment, their stay is often short.
There is heavy pressure to discharge patients home to families or back out to the community, even though we don't know if the medication works, even though they're not stable, even though we don't know if the side effects are going to be treated and if they have a continuum of care that awaits them after discharge. The system is just so broken.
Today, I spoke with this woman, Republican Senator Hildy Angus of Mojave County. She's proposed legislation, numerous bills, to expand the number of beds available for use and to create a program that provides long-term care for people suffering from mental health illnesses. Now, without these programs, Rachel Strife tells me these people often commit crimes and either wind up in jail or prison. And if they don't, the only place for them to go is back with their parents. Often these people are adults suffering through these mental health illnesses. Those folks, their family members, are the ones who are forced to provide them care. And in cases like this one, those alternatives have turned deadly. Reforms need to be made. Send it back to you, Trim.
All right, Sean, thank you. So let's take a legal deep dive into this case. Criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz joins me now. Hector, this is such an awful case. And typically in cases like these, would the defense be reason of insanity?
Possibly. We just heard all this information about his history of mental health. So this is the kind of case that as lawyers, I think in the beginning are going to look at, it's not less of a question of who did it, but why, right? And so there's going to be a lot of time spent in terms of the mental health, looking at the records, looking at the issues. And so I do think preliminarily, that's where the defense is very likely to go in terms of whether or not this is what we call a GEI, guilty except insane.
Okay.
Right? Where the person potentially could go to trial. And the issue is not, again, did he do it? It's the issue of why.
Right.
And whether he was suffering some kind of mental defect and couldn't appreciate the nature of his actions, right? And again, that has to hinge on the fact that this person was suffering a mental health issue. It can't be because of an addiction to drugs or alcohol. It's got to be clear that, he's been laboring with a serious mental issue, right?
And when mental health is the focal point of a case like this, though, what is the process in terms of, let's just say he's your client, what are you going to do now moving forward? Does he get tested? You talked about evaluation. Right. What is that like?
Preliminarily, there's we call it a Rule 11, which is I need to know, can he appreciate what's going on here? When we go to court, I sit down with him and I go over the indictment. Does he know what he's charged with?
Yeah, does he understand
Absolutely.
fully?
Absolutely. And then importantly, can he assist with his defense? And if not, then there's a whole preliminary process where we pause the criminal case. And essentially what then happens is there's an evaluation by medical professionals to determine whether he's competent to even stand trial. And so that can delay this whole thing for months, maybe even longer. Wow. And then so once that is resolved and, we are at a point where he can assist in his defense, then comes the trial, right? And his lawyers aren't just looking at this issue in terms of his mental health. They're also looking at what happened, how it happened, the history here. There's a lot of work that goes into this in terms of defending an individual who's in this situation.
When we first found out about this yesterday, many of us were thinking, my goodness, this is so similar to Nick Reiner, who back in December allegedly murdered his parents, Rob and Michelle, very famous Hollywood director, Rob Reiner. So, what parallels or differences do you draw with, Turk's case and Reiner's case?
I think the history of mental illness, right? I think that the playbook that Reiner's counsel are following is very similar to the playbook that's going to be followed here in this situation, where a lot of the time is going to be spent. There's a criminal case that's going to be going on, but the emphasis is less, right, in terms of, did somebody else do it? What was there self-defense issues here? And again, those might be issues that his lawyer looks at. Not to say that his lawyers aren't going to be spending a lot of time looking at the investigative process. Were there any mistakes? Were there issues? Collection of evidence? If they got search warrants for certain evidence, just to make sure that all those boxes are checked and that his rights are protected. But the most important focus is going to be his mental health.
All right. Hector, thank you.